As far as for return missionaries, that was tough. I would say returning from a mission was 50 times more difficult than going on a mission. I remember coming home. I spent some time with my family, but after like a day, everybody went back to work. Everyone in my family, they all had things to do, except for me. I had nothing to do. For the first time in 2 years, I had nothing to do. And it's surprising how incredible of a trial that is, to have nothing to do. It's almost like I felt guilty. I needed to be doing something productive. I needed to be moving some kind of work forward. But I didn't have a job. I didn't have school to do. I came home in the middle of the summer. So I didn't go back to school for another 2.5 months. My first advice is find a way to make yourself busy. I became very actively involved in my YSA branch back home. And yes, it was a branch, and it was an hour and a half away. But I went to everything. Anything that was going on, I was driving 3 hours round trip to go and do that, because I needed it. I needed to be there. I needed to be involved. I needed to surround myself with people. I went out with the missionaries a lot. Kind of reconnected with some old high school friends that in my area were not members of the church. I'm very much minority where I come from. I was the only member in my high school. Yeah, I connected with some people who weren't members, and had some conversations. But I needed to have a purpose. So it was very important for me to have a purpose, and that's what I did until I got a job, in which I had a second purpose now, and it was good. So find ways to make yourself productive. Find ways to make yourself busy. I definitely experienced post-mission depression, as most missionaries will. I think it's probably a sign you did a good job if you're having a hard time giving it up. It took me about 3 months probably to get over it. A lot of that just comes from having a purpose and working for something. Don't go home and just play video games. Don't go home and just sit on the couch and watch movies. I don't think I watched a single movie coming home. I got home in June. I think it was January before I actually started watching all the movies I missed. I think it took me at least a month to start listening to normal music again. And that's not every missionary, but that's how it was for me. Yeah, I remember I was driving my grandma's car, and she had satellite radio, and I turned it to a station that I used to listen to before the mission, and I just couldn't listen to that music anymore, and I didn't feel comfortable, so I switched it to Christian rock, and that's all I listened to for a couple of months, until I finally kind of got used to being a normal person again, I guess. But yeah, you can expect that. It's normal. Doesn't mean you're weird. Doesn't mean, you may not have that. Some people transition a lot easier than me. Make yourself busy. Transitioning back into normal life is not nearly as important as maintaining the habits you had on your mission. Keep your study time. You spend a lot of study time, 2-3 hours, depending on the mission, maybe more if you're training someone. But keep an hour every morning for study time. That's very important. One of the biggest fears that I had coming home was I was afraid that I was going to become the person I was before my mission. And that was actually a pretty valid fear, because if you don't work to keep your level of spirituality you gain on the mission, you will lose it over time. So keep those habits. Scripture study, prayers, keep that going. Just as important as it is to find a purpose just to maintain sanity, it's also important to keep the very powerful, very strong habits that you have on your mission. Because if you take time off, basically stop studying scriptures and get out of the habit, it's much more difficult to develop that after now you have other things taking your time and your attention. For example, when you get into school, or if you get into a job and now you have other things competing for your time, and now it's harder to develop that habit because you've already devoted the time elsewhere. But if you keep the time set aside every morning, keep that schedule where you're in your scriptures or in something, you're studying gospel somewhere. So that's going to be a lifesaver. A lot of missionaries go inactive. when they get home. Not a lot of people like to talk about that. Keeping those habits is going to be a lifesaver for you. So don't take that lightly.